Well, good morning, everyone. We're thrilled that you've joined our webinar. And if you're watching this as a recording, thank you very much for watching. So the subject for today's webinar, we're going to be talking about two topics that we are pretty much obsessed with at Datex. One is third-party logistics, and the other is warehouse management. So we're going to be exploring both of those industries. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how 3PLs are leveraging the latest in WMS technology. And we're going to look out into the future, both in the short, medium term, and a little bit out in the future, long term. So first of all, I'll be your host. I'm Glenn VanLandingham. I'm the Vice President of Solutioning and Implementation at Datex. I've been involved with WMS for many, many years, done tons of projects with 3PLs. I got two great participants with me today. We have Dwight Klappich. He's an ex-Gartner analyst, also been in the industry for a long time. And we got McCord Frampton. He's a senior solution consultant who is also an expert in this industry. I'll let them introduce themselves. Dwight, you can go first.
Well, thanks, Glenn, and thanks for having me today. This is an exciting topic. Yeah, so my name is Dwight Klappich. I spent 25 years at Gartner. I retired on, of all things, Friday, June 13th last year, but I still kept my hand in the industry. But at Gartner, I led Gartner's supply chain technology when I started 25 years ago, and then by the end, we'd grown to over 20 analysts just doing supply chain tech, and I led our warehousing and fulfillment technology coverage.
McCord.
Hey everyone, McCord Frampton. I'm a solutions consultant at Datex, so responsible for engaging with our prospects here and understanding their requirements. A lot of those being in the 3PL universe, so work hands-on with a lot of them. Prior to this, was in implementation for WMS, so I've been doing WMS implementations and solutioning for almost 10 years now, which is crazy to say as I say it, but worked with a lot of different industries and different companies. So looking forward to the chat today and glad that you could join us, Dwight.
Thanks.
All right. Well, then let's get into this. The way this will work is I'll pose the questions to you guys and you guys can comment. Let's get right into it. I mean, let's just talk about the state of the 3PL market. I mean, to sort of set the stage. I mean, anybody can go research this themselves. I mean, all the publications every year put out their reports on what's happening in 3PL. Inbound Logistics does a report every year. DC Velocity does as well. I mean, if you looked at those reports, they would talk about things like rising costs that 3PLs are dealing with, compliance, cybersecurity. I think the customer life cycles, probably, we see this a lot. Most prominent customer acquisition, customer onboarding, customer retention. But I'll throw it to you first, Dwight. What do you think stands out most today, the way 3PLs are operating versus the past decade?
Well, great. It's a great question, great place to start. I mean, so what I spent my time doing at Gartner was talking to clients. You'd have upwards of 1,000 client inquiries a year over my 25 years, 10,000 plus client inquiries, talked to a lot of 3PLs. And, a lot of what you read in the magazines, any logistics organization is having a lot of those problems. But I think 3PLs, when you really talk to the executives in the 3PL, they live in a unique world, right? It's a challenging world. You think about it, it's a very competitive marketplace. The marginal differences between 3PLs and their ability to run warehouse operations, there's more similarities than difference. So it's a very, competitive, commoditized marketplace. And yet they have all of the same challenges of rising costs, labor challenges. And you kind of put all of that together, it's a very difficult place to do business, very difficult place to differentiate. So while absolutely they're focused on efficiency and productivity, just like everybody else, I think what I was starting to see with the 3PLs was that I think the leading 3PLs were trying to get beyond the efficiency. Of course, efficiency is just table stakes. you got to be able to run your warehouses effectively or you're not going to stay in business. But they're kind of flipping it around to try to become more customer intimate. There was more focus on the customer and try how can I differentiate myself to my customers. So, they're focusing on things is how could I be faster? How could I be more flexible? How could I accommodate their needs more effectively to try to differentiate myself from a guy down the road that can run a warehouse just as well as I can? And I think that, we started to see that really manifest in when they started looking at what kind of systems do I need to focus on that more customer intimate kind of environment. It really changed the dynamics of what they're looking for in a WMS. So,
Yeah, I would totally concur with all that. I mean, it's really interesting when you're a WMS provider and you're servicing 3PLs. It's really interesting how you have your main customer, which is the 3PL, but it's amazing how much time you spend talking about and focusing on their customer, right? Because they're so ingrained on servicing their customer, retaining that customer, that we kind of naturally have to do the same. So, McCord, I'll throw it to you. You're out there talking to Datex 3PL customers all the time. What are you seeing? What pressures are they facing, or what observations have you made lately?
Yeah, I mean, no surprise. It really falls in line with a lot of those reports out there. Like I was looking at that inbound logistics 2025 3PL perspectives report. And the first thing that's listed there is what we hear about the most, which is those rising operational costs. And whether it's from labor, from technology, materials, space, all of that is squeezing their margins. And the way that manifests with us, being a WMS provider and in software is we're seeing 3PL operators come to us and doing a really high level of due diligence in evaluating the tools that they're going to use or that they're exploring to use, right? So it's no longer, definitely not the case that you can afford to just kind of plug in a tool to see if it's going to work. Right? This needs to be thoroughly evaluated to make sure that this is going to actually provide measurable ROI for a 3PL. This can't just be a let's plug it in and see if it works. This needs to be a no, we're confident this is going to give us real benefit. The second thing, and this kind of lends to what you were just saying, Glenn and Dwight, that this is a competitive environment. They have to respond to the demands of their customers, and one of those demands that customers are kind of clamoring for is improved technology, right? Modern technology that they know is out there. It's 2026. Everyone's using AI tools and kind of rich reporting and analytics tools, and they're coming to expect that from their 3PL providers. So again, they're getting that pressure from the customer, but they have to keep in mind that they have these rising operational costs. And so that's leading even more so to them being really selective and cautious with the tools that they're picking to make sure this is really going to provide them real benefit and value and not going to be just another complex system that really isn't doing much for them.
Okay, well, let's keep going down that path, McCord and Dwight, and talk about technology. Let's specifically talk about WMS, right? Because I think 3PLs in some ways are like any other company that leverages a WMS. First of all, they probably have a love-hate relationship with that, just like they do with all their other technologies, and they use a WMS like everybody else, right, to run their distribution centers. But in a lot of ways, 3PLs rely on their WMS for much more strategic stuff that's totally different than what other companies do. So maybe you guys can talk about that a little bit. Dwight, you can go first again. What are some of the ways that 3PLs use modern WMS technology as a strategic platform that's just different than other industries?
Well, I think that the first and most fundamental thing is to a brand owner company, logistics and warehouse, it costs to doing business. So absolutely, they're focused on efficiency, but at the end of the day, if their costs go up by 1%, so what? They're still going to run that warehouse. WMS to a 3PL, that is the solution that they're selling. They are selling warehouse services to their customers. So it's a profit center. I mean, it is core to their business. So if they don't do a very good job, they lose that customer. And if they're not positioned well, they're not going to win the next customer. So it has a major impact, So a company that sells soup, if their warehouse doesn't run effectively, doesn't mean they're not going to sell soup, right? Customers are still going to buy their soup. If you don't run your warehouse, you're just not going to sell and generate new business. So I think that completely changes the dynamics right away. So you start to see, things like, having a purpose-built WMS versus something that was a WMS built for a brand owner company that could be used by a 3PL. So we see, I talked to virtually every WMS provider that we knew of when I was at Gartner, and I would say that 80%, if not 100% of them said they did 3PL. But what they did was they just bolted on a 3PL billing engine to a basic, system designed for a brand owner company. Where I think in the 3PL world, you have this odd phenomena called a multi-tenant warehouse, where you might have 3 different customers operating in the same warehouse. Well, not every WMS can support that. I think the other thing is those 3 customers that you have in that warehouse, they all have different wants and needs. And so you've got to accommodate that. Where it's your own warehouse, you can manage that and say, hey, we're focused on our needs. And that's all you deal with. Hey, the current customers you have needs, the next customer that comes along, you have needs. So I think that places a particular challenge on the WMS to accommodate that. And then you come back to, if you're trying to become more client intimate because of all of that, does your WMS kind of support that? Does it allow you to respond quickly? Maybe you could. We can always custom a WMS. I was in the WMS business in the 1980s, and guess what? We customized WMSs back then, but we wrote everything in COBOL. So the simplest thing you ever did would take you 3 months to do. Well, in the world, 3PLs live in 3 months is too long. How fast can you accommodate someone's routine? How fast can you get up one of their new warehouses? Those are all unique pressures that I think if you can't support, then I mean it puts a burden on the 3PL, and they're going to look for something that does support those kind of things.
Yeah. By the way, I think I'm guilty of writing a few lines of COBOL code right way back in my history. So McCord, same thing. Talk about, again, you're out there, you're talking with 3PLs all the time. You're talking about the latest and greatest in WMS. What's just fundamentally different for 3PLs when it comes to them looking at WMS technology versus, like Dwight said, a typical brand customer?
Yeah, I mean, Dwight nailed it with the bolt-on billing module, right? Like that'll work to some degree for 3PLs, but where I've seen real success stories and like where I've seen our customers win in the last 5 years, let's say, is in this kind of flexible billing module that we have, a powerful billing module. What's so unique about the way 3PL operators work is they're ingrained with their sales team, right? Their sales team is out there trying to win new business for them. And to do that, often they have to get creative with their billing terms, right? Whether it's finding new ways to bill, getting into new industries, whether I bill by weight or volume or quantity, you name it. So having a WMS that has a robust billing module, not just some bolt-on billing module that gets you 50% of the way there, it really enables your sales team to be confident when they're out there trying to win new business that whatever they're selling, they're going to be able to back up with the technology in the warehouse to actually capture that revenue. I think of many real examples, in the day-to-day with Datex. One that stands out was we have a customer that's that was getting into the precious metal space. So they were storing kind of gold, silver, platinum, things like that for customers. And I'm sure you guys have seen the news, right? Those metal prices are through the roof. And so the way they kind of negotiated that and worked the deal with the customer was they were going to charge based on the current market value of that metal. So it was going to be, depending on what gold was that day, they were going to charge a certain percentage to be storing that metal because insurance purposes, things like that. So in our footprint WMS, we set up an API integration to the London Bullion Market Association, the LBMA, to get twice a day get a real-time market price for gold, silver, platinum, things like that. So we could accurately generate the billing records in the system. So that's kind of one side of it, Glenn. But the other side, I would say, is where I've seen people win with modern WMS is having a scalable solution. So in 3PLs, a lot of the time you may be, in a particular industry for a long time. And again, going back to your sales team or just in natural growth, you want to get into different industries. You want to get into different things that you haven't been in before, and having a scalable solution that has all those components kind of ready to go and just need to be flipped on is a huge advantage. So I think of a customer we had that was mainly in like a bulk B2B kind of flow where they're shipping mostly full pallets and case picks. They saw an opportunity to get into the e-com fulfillment space. And because they were equipped with Footprint WMS, it was as simple as turning on a cart pick application for them, setting up a couple different allocation strategies. And the system was not holding them back. They were able to take on this new customer and break into this new industry, with no new implementation. They had a system that was set up to grow with them. So I think just kind of two themes there, right? Is scalable solution to grow with you and kind of grow into new industries with you, but also having a robust billing module that's going to enable your sales team to go out and win new business however they see fit.
Well, Glenn, I'd love to add something. That was great.
Sure.
There's a now defunct thing. It used to be called the Journal of Logistics, and this probably goes back 10, 15 years ago. And they had done a study of 3PLs that said that 3PLs, they were offering more and more services, basically at the same amount of money that they were doing before, because they were unable to, figure out what the value of those was to convince the customer to pay, additional money. So basically what they're saying, they're offering all these services, it was just doing profit erosion. And one of the unique things I saw some companies doing on advanced, 3PL billing was actually what McCord was just talking about, is working with the sales team to use some of that information so that they had a better idea of what they should charge the customer, and then being prepared, hey, that's something like this metals thing. How many WMSs would be able to do that? I can't think of very many, but that's a value add to the customer that, is in a unique position that they can go that and sell the value of that. And then that again comes back to my whole thing of customer intimacy. So we've seen some of these capabilities used in kind of off-label uses. So the 3PL billing is like helps them actually maybe through their CRM system. How do I build a contract for the customer,
Yes.
so I build a more profitable contract? So
Yeah.
I think that's where you kind of started off by how you're using it more strategically. I think that's one example where it kind of changes the whole dynamic from just, hey, can I pick a box? Any WMS can pick a
Yeah.
box. Not many could help you figure out, how do I make more money out of this?
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I think the way I would kind of put a cap on it is that, like, traditionally, all the years that we help businesses put together business cases for WMS, it was traditionally all about cost savings, right? It was about, can I reduce my labor costs in the DC? Can I make my inventory more accurate so I don't have write-offs? Maybe there were some order fulfillment savings and that kind of thing, but it was mostly an exercise in where can we shave off costs. When we talk to 3PLs today about their WMS, it's rarely about cost. I mean, sure, they like those things. It's almost always about the top line, right? It's what you talked about, Dwight. We got these new services we got to offer. We got to have a platform that knows how to support that, knows how to bill for that, right? We've got to make sure the way we bill our customers is efficient and quick and accurate. It doesn't have revenue leakage. So there's just a different mindset when there's a 3PL environment thinking about implementing a WMS versus traditional environments. Okay, so let's keep things moving here. Again, let's switch gears one more time, and let's look out into the future, right? So we can start maybe in the short term, right? There's people listening to this, they have a WMS, they've been using it for a while. If you're a 3PL, what are some of the things that you think are coming, some of the innovations that you think are on the horizon for 3PLs? Dwight, I'll let you go first. What do you think is on the horizon for 3PLs in 2026?
Well, I think I want to come back to just exactly what you were just talking about is, again, covering WMS for Gartner for 25 years. I would say, we've approached parity across WMS as what we used to call core WMS. And core WMS to us is just basic receive, put away, store, account, pick, pack, ship. If I look at the 100 WMSs we are tracking at Gartner, there are more similarities that are different. But parity does not mean equality. Is that yes, they all do the basics, but the difference is what are those unique capabilities that those systems can offer. So like you said, hey, if it's just about efficiency and all I want to do is how fast can I pick a box, there's not a lot of differences across WS. There are. I mean, I often use a car example is there's parities across cars, right? Every car has an engine, a transmission, four tires, a steering wheel, and it can go from A to B. But we would all agree there's a difference between a Toyota Corolla and a Bugatti. There's still differences there. The question is, are those reasonable differences? So what we saw with the 3PLs came back to, I talked to a lot of CIOs from 3PLs in my previous life, and a very common theme for them was, onboarding time. How fast can I get a customer up and running? And then how easily can I accommodate unique customer requirements? Those are two common things we heard all the time. They assumed that the efficiency was table stakes, right? That most WMS are going to be able to accommodate that. But they were sitting there going, hey, those are two key things that affect my customers. And so that was a big focus that we've seen that start to differentiate, some of the systems. And I think what's interesting came back to, we mentioned the whole multi-tenant thing. Well, I had a lot of customers who were running some name brand, I can't name them here, WMSs, but you know what? They're running this WMS in their e-com warehouse for a customer, and they're running this WMS, a different WMS, in their consumer goods because that one was good at consumer goods. This is better at e-com. And the worst I ever heard was 27 different WMSs that they were supporting. Now that is a huge burden on the IT organization to try to support that many. I would say that's an exception, but it was not uncommon, 5, 6, 7 different WMSs, just to accommodate the industry different needs that they had and some of that. So that's a key, is seeing some of that. So I know you guys talk about compliance. Well, if I'm going into a heavy compliance industry, I don't want to have to go buy another WMS because I have to do that. But the real thing is we saw is some of those capabilities built around the system to make accommodating unique needs is a big issue. We're seeing the introduction of things like low-code platforms, wizards to help with the implementation and things like that, all to address that speed. Now, again, we've customized WMSs forever. Yes, it's gotten a little easier that we can customize some of these WMSs. But the reality is the minute I start hacking up a traditional WMS and writing Java or C++ code, I break the code. And now it makes upgrades and maintenance difficult. So putting in tools that allow me to accommodate some of that without breaking the code is a huge thing. Because as we've said, next customer in the door, or even existing customers now, want you to do something. Many cases, no is not a legitimate answer. So I think that's one of some of the key things we see is anything that helps out with that flexibility and onboarding. So whether that's low code or code. And I mean, reporting, we kind of addressed that. That's still kind of an issue, but I think most WMS is, hey, you want a custom document, we can do that. But new pick methodology, no. Pilling based on the price of precious metals, no, you can't. So I think those are some of the key things.
Well, we could have another webinar on the whole topic of how do I customize my WMS for all the nuances of my different sites or different customers or whatever without putting me at risk of upgrades and stuff like that later. I mean, we've been trying to solve that problem forever in WMS. And there are ways to solve that now. But McCord, you got a sneak peek at all the latest innovations and tech coming in WMS. Give the listeners a little preview of the things that you think are going to be impactful.
Yeah, I mean, the first, as Dwight is saying that, right, I'm certainly thinking about what we have over at Datex with our footprint WMS, but especially in the 3PL world, people always ask, what can you do for me? What's the cost? But most importantly, how fast can you do it, right? The third thing is speed to implement. because they're thinking about how can they onboard their customers quickly. And so that's been a big trend in the industry, continuous adaptability. Again, especially in 3PLs where the name of the game has changed. You're going to get new customers. You're hopefully going to get, or potentially going to get into new industries. And so having a adaptable platform like what we have with Datex and Footprint WMS with a low-code application platform, we call it ours Datex Studio, to do these changes without writing this custom code that you guys were talking about from the 80s and 90s, right? This is no longer a cumbersome task to take on. It's a visual no-code, low-code editor where I can literally drag and drop things around. If I need to add a field here, add a widget, change my process, this is no longer like a developer activity. It's something that warehouse operators and super users can even start to take on to onboard their customers. So number one is definitely continuous adaptability and kind of low-code application platforms to assist with that. I think in general too, we're seeing things change from a reactive to a proactive approach, and that's what they're expecting out of their systems, as well as working together collaboratively with other systems, within the supply chain ecosystem, right? So whether that's automation, AI, AI models are a huge thing now, and I can think of this is a real example of a customer we had that was using a lot of temporary labor in their facilities and had a huge problem with understanding how to appropriately staff on a given day. They needed some help kind of predicting based off their order pool, what were they going to need from a labor force perspective to staff for the day. So we did a partnership with a company called Endeavor Labs where we took all of their historical footprint data, their pick data, their order data, the materials, the quantities. Was it a pallet pick? Was it a case pick? This kind of huge, treasure chest of data, and fed it into this AI model and said, hey, start predicting the labor that I'm going to need based off of my order pool for what's today, Thursday, let's say Saturday, right? We know the orders that have to ship out on Saturday, historically what it takes for me to do these types of picks. Tell me what do I need to call in from a labor perspective on Saturday. And so that's huge, right? It's working together with ecosystems to kind of create a best in breed overall system. But also being proactive instead of reactive. That's saving you real dollars, and that's going to help you avoid headaches in the future, avoid issues and risk.
Okay. Well, guys, we've only got a couple minutes left, but I'm going to let you get in one more soundbite, maybe one more prediction or one more piece of guidance you have for 3PLs quickly before we wrap up. Dwight.
Well, yeah, I think, looking out in the future, I think it builds on everything we've talked about up to this point in time. I mean, I think that, if you look at manufacturing organizations, distributions, they've had, ERP platforms that kind of cover the core capabilities of business. We haven't seen that really in 3PL. They've always had to kind of cobble together. So what we're seeing is some expansion from just core WMS into other areas. Like I had mentioned, is leveraging some of what I might have in my billing engine or even labor management. I have that, to pull that into my CRM system, my sales. So we'll see some of that, not just integrating, but we're really looking at how I can use those, from a process standpoint across that. Certainly AI, as McCord mentioned, but smart use of AI. AI is a great buzzword right now, but it's what's the right tool for. I always told customers when I talked about that is tell me what problem you're trying to solve, and then we'll figure out what AI to solve that. You can't just generically. So generative AI, agentic AI, they have a place. Can help with some of these things we talked about, like onboarding time and some of that kind of stuff. But there's other forms of AI. I think the thing we haven't really touched on here is, certainly with everything we talked about, cost and labor, challenges, certainly I think 3PLs are on the forefront of using flexible robotics. So I think we're going to continue to see that. And there's certainly some interplay between the WMS and some of that. And that's, again, another topic for another webinar sometime. But yeah, I think
we're doing a bunch of those projects right now. It's super interesting. Super interesting. All right, McCord, one last thought, one last prediction.
I think like again, AI, a huge buzzword, but we're really starting to see it come into practice and real use cases, like the one I just gave, but also within our internal applications themselves, right? It's really helping us do things that weren't possible without a developer before. So we talk about all these configurations and screen changes and things like that. Like that's already gotten better, but AI is just going to continue to improve that and make it easier for citizen developers to take on these things.
Awesome. Well, I think we have to leave it there. We're just about out of time. Dwight and McCord, really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who joined, for listening. Just as a follow-up, Datex is getting ready to publish a white paper that's going to discuss a lot of these topics, the state of the 3PL industry. Everybody who's on the webinar today will probably see that in their inbox. But again, thank you very much for joining, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Dwight.
Thanks.